What I want to talk about today is very much what you might do on the ground in terms of actually engaging people, in terms of actually perhaps enhancing their understandings of particular issues that you are in your research concerned with, and also to actually get some co-production of knowledge going for a particular research user group. So it's very much hands-on from various examples. But I want to particularly focus on how you could use digital media for the purpose of this, and not just for dissemination of research, but for actual impact, which is, of course, a big difference that I think still gets greatly confused. Now, I'm a historian, and I think in sort of amongst a number of my colleagues, there is still great reservation about this whole impact agenda, partly because people aren't so sure what it's about. So the first message, perhaps picking up the point about early career researchers, find your user group. Who are your research users? That's critical, and do that at the time of your PhD already. For me, that sort of happened a bit accidentally because I was working with a lot of people who had migrated, so there was my research user group pretty much by default. But obviously it will depend a bit on your subject, and I would acknowledge that for some it will be a little bit more difficult, but it's my firm belief everyone has a research user. You just need to identify it. So digital media, how can we go beyond just using it to disseminate something? Now, obviously, dissemination is critical, so I don't want to downplay that element of dissemination. But a few things for me are very important. Now, first of all, I would say you need to start using these kinds of tools right from the get-go. So not just halfway through or at some stage at the end, because suddenly you've realized, oops, I haven't disseminated anything. If you want to make use of it, do it right from the get-go. But it has to have meaning as well. And therefore, I'd like to particularly make a point about Twitter. I'm quite a great fan of Twitter, but I think I use it perhaps quite differently from some of my colleagues. I don't really use it for academic networking much. I have some academic followers, and please, if you do want to follow me, by all means do. But generally, I use it for engagement purposes. So what that means is that I don't really academic chit-chat on it, because that will put potential research users off. It might depend a bit on your topic. If you're a policy-type researcher, I think there's more overlap. But if I suddenly started tweeting about diaspora theory, I'm not very sure that my diaspora Scots would be especially interested in that. So maybe just bear that in mind. That's very important, and therefore perhaps also the number of your followers in some ways is less important. If you have 50 and they are all totally hooked on and relevant to your research and your immediate users, I think that's more important than if you had 500 and most of them were fellow academics. Depending on how you want to use Twitter, that's obviously the initial premise here to begin with. Don't just have it because you think you should have it. I mean, if you never ever use it, I would say don't have it. It's kind of worse to have that empty sort of online profile there. But really, I want to move on to examples to show you what I've been doing. And I make no claim to this being in any way comprehensive or particularly brilliant, but hopefully it will facilitate some discussion for us today. Now, I will be talking mostly about my Scottish research, but two other examples to begin with. This is a team project funded by the AHRC. I was a co-investigator for this project, and when we started it, we set up what we called a digital community. And this was a combination of a dissemination tool and generation of sort of user knowledge, if you like. We were writing stories there. That one, for example, was about on St. George's Day, the last one when I took the screenshot there, that the people involved in the project would write in an accessible way for research users, but at the same time, people could actually log in and contribute themselves beyond just making comments. So there are several stories written by, this is a project on the English in North America, by, say, descendants about how they celebrated Christmas or something like that. So this is one thing. I have a Future Research Leaders grant, and that's my newest and now current project, and that is looking at expats in Asia. And this isn't set up yet, but there will be an engagement exchange platform for expats on this, and I'm developing this now to sort of replicate perhaps some of the things I've learned for this new project and make it a platform there. But as I said, I mostly want to focus on some Scottish stuff, and that's where ultimately the kilt come in. Now, my first big point, I think, is it's good to have a bit of a brand. Now, what is that? I don't know. But I think What I mean is that you have something that's easily recognizable, perhaps across different platforms, so people know who you are. So in this case, this image is a key factor in this. So all the platforms I have use it in one way or another. And just to emphasize how well this has worked for me, I've been at various events where people have said, oh, aren't you the person with that image from the games? And just to make it even stronger, I've got this business card now, which you probably can't really see, but it uses the same image. So it's really running through everything. Well, business card, it's more my impact engagement card, really. But it's used for all these, and I really have found that useful. Now, it may not be an image, it may be something different, but, have something that's your brand, your thing, is very important. But also, don't just offer people stories or little things about your research. I think it's critical that you can offer them something they can actually use in different ways. So to give you one example, on my blog or website, it's kind of turned into more of a website now, but I have a number of resources. This is one of them. I've called it the Scottish World Map. So it is a map of the world, as you can see there at the top. But when you hover over the countries, it will come up with a window that opens and tell you about the Scots in this particular country. So it relates directly to my research, but it's something quite different, really. It's not academic, but it's usable. I have evidence of schools having used it. Now, not every country is clickable yet, so I'm building on it, but this is really a direct translation of my work into something that's actually usable. Another resource, just to mention another one, is this one here. I did my PhD on the Scots in New Zealand, and this is a timeline of Robert Burns and his connection with New Zealand. And again, schools in New Zealand have been using this in their teaching. So it's very simple, not too difficult to set up. I always only use open source software. If it's not open source, I'm not using it. That's kind of my thing. So it's easy, it's accessible. Well, easy in the sense of doing it. Obviously, there's a time factor involved in doing it. We've already heard about some of the issues there in the previous talk. Also, I think it's really important that you start to tailor your writing towards your research users. Again, for people involved with stakeholder-type research, that might be a little bit more straightforward. But again, find an outlet for your research. In my case, there are lots of historical journals or community newspapers that are the most obvious one to pick, and just two examples there. This will expose you, this will get your name out there in different ways, and people will come to you because they usually have a shortage of contributors in these kinds of outlets. That's my experience anyway. They will want to help you, and it is obviously more disseminating than actual impact in this particular case, but it'll help you on the way. But another key point, I think, is if you do things like that, it won't. Online initiatives, you still should be doing things on the ground, and that's kind of where the kilt comes in, because it's actually, for the purposes of my research, been quite helpful there. But I just wanted to put this up because here I've done some work with people in New Zealand around a particular Highland Games. But there has always been an online element following on from it. So it wasn't just about me running around in a kilt at some Highland Games trying to toss the caber. No, I didn't. But there were other things coming from it, resources that are usable in the future for people if they wanted to. And there's another example from New York where I was walking in this year's Tartan Day parade, and there was always follow-on activities. And just to emphasize how critical this has been, this organization, the American Scottish Foundation, I've just met with them on Monday. We're now launching a network that is meant to engage business people for connections between the US and Scotland, and I'm an advisor to that group, so there's been actual benefit and change generated from these initiatives. Co-production of knowledge then obviously is the goal in many respects around this, and this is one example where COSCA, that's the Council of Scottish Clans in the US, have launched what they call the Wandering Scots Book Club. It's a book club where people debate certain issues that they are concerned with. An hour long, it's recorded for a YouTube channel. It comes from the community, but I've been involved in helping them with getting this on the way, so it is very much a co-production of knowledge, using me as an expert for the knowledge I bring, but it's generated from within the community as a lasting resource. Slightly different example of that sort of co-production of knowledge, in fact, perhaps rather the facilitation of it, is my newest project in Scottish terms called My Story, the Scottish Diaspora. And this is a wall. If we could scroll down to lots of more faces where people tell their diaspora story. And So I'm facilitating this because I'm hosting it, because it's pretty much only text. It doesn't really cost me any money. Through these tools, it's sort of a bit structured by me because I have a set of questions. I respond to issues that come up to try and engage with people, but also just for any reader to enable them to learn things. So it's really about that production of knowledge about the Scots in particular countries as a resource that will remain there, generated by the users themselves for other users, facilitated by me. And I think these are some of the ways in which that can happen.